What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Thinking Project. Before we dive into today's episode and I introduce my guest, make sure that if you're watching this on YouTube, you hit that subscribe and notification bell. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other streaming service for podcasts, that you definitely subscribe because that helps the podcast out a ton. And remember that this video isn't sponsored by anybody except for my course on sales. So if you want to join a group for sales and learn more about that in your business or online selling, go ahead and join that. It's $79 a month, which is an absolute steal. There's all of the descriptions in the link below so you can learn more about that. With all that being said, let me introduce Paul Shin, who is an amazing guest. He's the founder of Tacos Together, a networking organization here in Utah. And his story of that coming up is amazing. His story of networking and partnerships and all of that insight is absolutely fascinating. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And please welcome Paul Shin. Exactly. All right, we're rolling. Thanks for being here, Paul.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, my
Absolutely, dude. Let me ask you this. Start off with a good question.
Sure.
What is the most important thing for you when you build a community?
That's a good question, man. To choose one thing, that's hard. You know, I know it sounds cliched, but I think really it just comes down to love.
Yeah.
Right? Like I know it sounds so corny, right? But when you love the people in your community, right? And your community is one of love, not fear or exclusion or hatred or anything else, right? Then it kind of grows and molds into like what the people need it to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I think about the Tacos Together community, right? Like we're not here necessarily to make more deals. We're not even here for like a charity purpose, right? At the end of the day, it's like we're here to be a place so people understand that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Right? That they have a place where they belong, right? That they're heard, that they're loved. And, you know, as I look at this last year, and it's crazy to think that we've been doing this for a year now, I think the evolution of the events and the community and even the technology that we're building has come from this place of like, we want to love the people that need it, right? That want to be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
And we wanted to accommodate for them too.
Well, that's what I enjoyed about the last event that you guys held. Because, you know, you had people running around. I think it was Marae. She's running around interviewing people. And one of the things I love about Tacos Together is about the inclusion of just like entrepreneurs, but also like bringing non-entrepreneurs out of the woodwork. Like if someone is just like a 9-to-5 employee, which by the way, like I don't ever bash because like whatever you got to do to make you happy, right?
Well, not only that, but we can't all be entrepreneurs, right? Like,
yeah, that's right.
That doesn't make sense.
I get called out for that too because I'm like, it's statistically impossible.
Yeah,
right? Like somebody, and people find a lot of joy in that. Some people love that. Like I grew up in a really poor town, but that's like we had a lot of happy people because, and I don't want to get too political, but for the most part, everybody was happy because that's just what we like to do. Just like you go to breakfast at the grocery store, you know, you get coffee the same, and then you go work, and then you come home and you whatever, right?
And then, but there's fulfillment there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you felt like you were a part of something bigger than just you, right? Yeah. No, I love that.
And what is a non-entrepreneur gonna tell themselves to make them go to like something like one of these networking events that Tacos Together puts together, right? Like it'd be really hard, but I know you guys publicize that, right? Like you don't have to be an entrepreneur to come here.
No, for
just
sure,
come and
man.
hang out. Just come and network.
Come
just
as
come
you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, for sure, man. And I appreciate that you bring that up, right? Because I think, you know, some people have started to think about it as like, oh, it's only for entrepreneurs because we're so active on LinkedIn, right? But it's not. It's really like we started with LinkedIn because, you know, we want to work with the business community, and we find that there's not always, but generally like less drama on LinkedIn and some of the other social medias, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, really, that was the idea. It was never like, oh, this is an exclusive club only for entrepreneurs or only for investors.
Yeah.
They're always invited, you know? But you're right. For the people who want to work a 9-to-5, the college kid who's just starting their progress, right?
Right.
Maybe you're brand new into a certain field. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. My wife comes, and granted, she's my wife, but like she's a stay-at-home mom, right? We just want people to come together.
Yeah.
Right? We focus more on the idea of like what can the power of community do together, much more than like what is the business deal that comes out of this immediately.
Right.
But the cool part is like we have seen amazing deals come out of this thing, right?
Yeah.
New partnerships, new ventures. People have gotten funded. Like amazing things come out of it because there's such a spread of like who shows up, right?
Yeah.
You can make it into whatever you want it to be as long as you're willing to like come in and go talk to people.
Right. Yeah, that's the tough part, right? We have kind of lost in our society the whole idea of like, just like how to approach people and how to do that kind of thing. But here's the cool part about Tacos Together. I mean, everybody has an opportunity to talk, but how do you approach networking with someone who might be a little introverted, maybe a little shy, like they don't know how to go up to talk to people? Like, how do you approach networking from that stance?
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, great question, my friend. A lot of it is just understanding. Again, I know it sounds super corny, right? But when you view people with love first, right? It's like all of a sudden they're not just an objective or like a checkbox, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, man, if I love Dalton, it's not like what's the least I can do to get him off my list, right? It's like, what do I do to help him find the success that he wants?
Yeah.
Right. And so if, I don't know, whoever the homie is that shows up, if he or she's a little more introverted, but I want to like truly get to know this person, right? Then it is taking a little bit of time out of my day to say let me get to know you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I get to know you, I can understand what are the things that you want out of this. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe it is like, okay, I want to try networking, but I just don't know how. Then it's like, okay, like let me get you introduced to a lot of other friendly people who aren't gonna throw you aside, right?
Yeah.
Right? Or is it more like you need to hang out with me and that's okay, right? Or like whatever.
Tag along to whoever, yeah.
But like, people are rarely like one size fits all. And then I think as a society we like the idea of one size fits all because it's easy and it's efficient, right?
Right.
But like, I don't know, man. I have 4 kids. I can't parent one size fits all.
Yeah.
Like to know my kids is to love my kids, right? And to love my kids, I have to be there for each one of them, right?
Yeah. Differently,
right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I just had an old manager. He called it an old mentor. He called it like chameleon management.
Yeah.
Where you had to just like mold to whatever at the time someone else needed, right?
Yeah, right. And I know that's the opposite of society today, right? It's all about like public schools are all about how do we, the lowest common denominator, right? Even the law in general is like we treat everyone exactly the same,
right?
And I get it, right? It's hard to scale this one-on-one relationship.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
but like I'm not worried about scaling it at that large level because like honestly, man, for every one person that I get to spend time with, I go find that like that person will then go spend time with someone else, right? Like that's how it scales.
Yeah.
Right. Is I don't necessarily need to do it for everyone, but if we have enough of us that are doing it, then we make the next guy feel welcome, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've been really grateful for this whole tacos community, right? Is I see hundreds of people come together and like all the time I have people that reach out and say, hey man, I normally never go to these events, but like I talked to person XYZ and like they were the friendliest person I've ever talked to, right?
Yeah.
They made sure that like I always had someone to talk to or like I was never alone or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that people just exemplify that forward.
Yeah, I think when you go to like these networking events, there's a lot of people who show up and it's kind of like if you go made the rounds, it almost feels like the same 10 people are at every single event.
Right.
But what's cool is when you see people who aren't there, who get invited for a different reason, who show up for the mission. And that's one thing that I think is really unique about just throwing events or creating a community in general, which I think you guys have done a really good job at Tacos Together, which is the mission behind it, right? Can you dive into that?
Yeah, man. Yeah, so like in one sentence, and it took me a really long time. Again, like we just hit a year.
Yeah.
And like we figured this out like a couple weeks ago, right? But like in one sentence, it's our mission is to make human connection simple and fun, right? And it really comes from, again, like I have 4 kids. I take them out to, whatever, playgrounds, etc.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see it, right? They'll go to these playgrounds and like half an hour later, they're going into like space or like sailing pirate ships with like a bunch of kids they've never met before.
Yeah.
And now they're all best friends. And like somewhere along the way, we decided that as adults, that's not okay anymore, right? We made human connection such a complicated process of like,
isn't it really though?
right? Like,
Yeah,
well,
dude.
you know, where'd you go to college? How many years of experience do you have? What's your title? How much money do you make? All these things factor in now.
Yeah.
But like at the core of it, as I've talked to them, like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know, thousands of people, so many of them just want to feel connected with people again.
Yeah.
You know? And
Well, it's funny how it went full circle, right?
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this a few times on my this podcast, but it's funny how we like created social media and it was a wonderful thing. It connected people who never would have been connected, but it's kind of gone full circle to now where like we're using social media to connect with people in our own community again.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then taking that social media as a medium to bring people to live events or whatever. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's just funny how it all worked out because like a few years ago, like we both saw, like all three of us here, we saw the idea that social media was like brand new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I got like Facebook wasn't a thing until I was halfway through high school or something like that,
Yeah.
or maybe like freshman year or something like that it got big. But it was crazy because before that, you're right, it was just like we're all kind of the same, and then we, you know, it just got wild. But now we're using it to bring communities together.
Right.
As far as like people in proximity, like close in proximity to each other, right?
Yeah, and honestly, that's the eventual goal of, you know, what we're building here. So, you know, we are, and I won't go too far into it. We are like looking into building our own technology as well. You know, grateful to have an amazing CTO. But really, that's it, right? Is somewhere along the way we decided, you know what, technology was going to replace human connection, right?
Yeah.
And then we realized that wasn't going to work. So now we're trying to use it as a tool to like help human connection, right? And I think there's ways that we can do it better. But at the end of the day, man, whether it's the events, whether it's the online community, again, the in-person thing, the app that we're working on, everything that Tacos stands for is this idea of making human connection simple and fun.
Yeah.
And I think fun is important,
Yeah.
right? Like somewhere we became adults and we decided like fun was a silly thing, right? Or fun wasn't allowed anymore.
Or you like watch the videos on, or like you watch old movies and you think networking and it's a bunch of guys in business suits and they're all, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're
right.
doing stuff. I've been to some of those networking events and they're not fun.
Exactly.
They're not that. Yeah. It's just like I could have met all of you anywhere else and
Totally.
it wouldn't have been any different.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like some of the best connections I have are the ones that, you know, we're running around on a football field, like squirting each other with water guns.
Yeah, that's right. That was right.
Right? Like we do these weird, crazy events, but like
Yeah.
as we laugh together and we share food together, human connection becomes real, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
So, I mean,
Well,
that's the mission here. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, that's fine. I think that we've lost this idea of, and one thing that I'm a huge proponent of is like empathy just in life in general. Like
Yeah.
when I learned about that word, because it's weird, like English is a weird language. Like we have a lot of different words for like the same thing. And then we also have one word for like, it's kind of weird. Like love is a weird word for me. And I'll tell you why. Not that you're wrong. It's just like there's like a romantic part of that.
Dude.
When you know,
Dude, it was like 6 months ago, right? When I started using the word love.
yeah.
And that was really hard for me to get over because I agree.
Yeah.
It's more of a limitation of the English language
I agree. Yep.
than it is the concept of love.
Yeah.
Because like as I started thinking about it, and I felt weird telling people like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I love you,"
Right.
but I realized like I do, like I genuinely have this love for people, right?
Yeah.
But you're right, but not in like a romantic way,
But it's like,
but in like a,
yeah.
but you're my family, right? Like
Right.
I care about you. You're my brother. You're my sister. Like what can
Yeah.
I do to support you, to lift you,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that is a love. But you're right. The language.
The language is because like
Yeah.
because I might get this wrong. Enrique, how many words are there for love in Spanish? Is it just one? Yeah, there's a few, right? Yeah, and so but and they all describe like different things, right?
Yeah.
and we don't have to go into crazy, but it's wild that we just have one. Because empathy really like encompasses what I like to view of like this idea, right?
Yeah.
Because empathy by definition is sharing the thoughts and feelings of another person.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's really hard to have any ill will towards anybody.
Right. How can you not love someone when you like truly understand them?
Yeah. When
right?
you get into their shoes and you're like, I haven't been in your exact situation, but man, that must be really hard, right?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes all people need to hear. to just like be able to go and it's this idea of empathy, right? And like charity, and how these things aren't acts, right?
Yeah.
They're like so what I like to say is like, they're not acts, they're dispositions. It's like who you are.
Yeah.
And people can feel, because the crazy thing is people can feel that. Like they can feel who's genuine and who's not. Like we can taste it. Like I get the heebie-jeebies when I'm around you know, like people who don't have or at least at that moment don't have my best interest in mind.
Right.
Which is whatever, it's fine. We can get out there, but yeah.
No, but you hit the nail on the head, right? It's this idea of like, as we truly care for others and we understand others, right? And we want what's best for them, people do feel that, you know? And I think what you said also matters. You know, I've had people that come up and said, hey man, it's cool that you got hundreds of blankets for homeless people, but there's tens of thousands of people who are homeless.
Sure.
And it's like, yeah, I get that I can't help every single person.
Right.
But one, I don't know what the ripple effects of what we do are going to be, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know who other people are who then become inspired to one day help other people. Mm-hmm. But I think those effects are far reaching and impossible to understand, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I realized a while ago, like on this journey as I've gone through life, is I don't necessarily need to help. Like, I don't need to solve everyone's problems for their whole life, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes all we got to do is help someone get through today.
Yeah.
Right? Or just this week.
That. Yeah.
Right? And if we give them enough fuel to get through that, then like they'll pick themselves up or something will happen to just keep them going for another day or another week, right? And that ends up turning into a big change.
Yeah.
Right? And so again, my job is not to say like, hey man, I'm here to fix all your problems for the rest of your life. But my job is to like let you know that you have people who love you and care about you, right?
Yeah.
That you have a reason to fight for another day.
Yeah.
Right? And then just like go one more day. And like that all adds up, man.
It does. Well, and what's cool about this concept is, well, I heard it a few different ways. We went to the Churros for Change event.
Yeah.
It was a couple days before yours.
Scott's amazing, man.
Yeah, Scott. Yeah, his podcast. He's been on the show. He's amazing. But one of the people who was up there was like, I don't need to, like, oh, how did she put it? But essentially, I'm going to butcher the whole thing. But essentially, what I got from it and what she was trying to get at was like, yeah, you can't do everything. Like, my little thing doesn't matter to everybody, but it matters everything to one person, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Well, and what's funny is like we've lost kind of this philosophy of like we've really gone into like this transactional stuff. Like, like the person who came up to you, it was like, there's so many homeless people, it feels like we're not doing anything. It's like, yeah, but that's not the point of why we help, right? Yeah. Like the point of why we help is like we are supposed to help.
Yeah.
And if we have all of these things in front of us, we're still responsible to help out people. So if we touch one person or 10,000 people, like I've got to do something. You know what I mean? It's like I've got to do something.
Yeah.
Versus
and you're right.
Like,
to the people that got the help.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah. It was everything.
Yeah. And then again,
blankets,
who knows what that changes, right?
Yeah. Who knows? Well, and my whole thing goes back to like this idea, this way of thinking that's like, if I don't, if I do X, what am I going to get? Right. And eventually, like, I love studying like philosophy and theology or whatever. And you don't even have to take Christianity. You can take a non-Abrahamic religion like Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that.
Sure.
And you can say in any dogmatic religion or philosophy, you're looking at like, you have to transcend past the transaction.
Yeah.
For you to start finding meaning. Because like, if it's this like, I'll help give someone blankets if I can see what happens or if they do something, you know what I mean? It's like, there's levels, right? You have to graduate and eventually you have to get to this point where like you do things just because they're the right reason, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, here's the crazy part, right? Is like, I'm one, by no means am I like enlightened, right? Like I'm just a regular guy.
Well, what does that mean anyway?
Right. But as I've tried to like double down on this philosophy, right? As I've personally tried to live this, right? Of this idea of like give freely, without anything in return, try to help others. I mean, like I make no money on these events, right? All the money that we raise through sponsorships either goes back to the charity or to go support the next event.
Yeah.
Like I make my living on like the fractional CMO side on the side.
Yeah.
But it's true, man. Like whether you call it karma or the universe or God or whatever higher being,
Sure,
it's like
sure.
every time I've needed something this last year, even when I had no idea where it was going to come from,
Yeah.
it was then put in front of my path, right?
Yeah.
Like every time I needed it, it was there.
Yeah.
Every time, man.
Well, and what's funny is you mentioned the word enlightenment, and one of my favorite stories behind that is like it's a really famous quote. Have you ever heard the quote like "chop wood, carry water"?
No,
You ever heard
about
that? Okay, so there's a story. It's really short. A young man goes on a trek to find the Buddha and to ask him what it takes to be enlightened.
Right.
And he goes on this long journey. He finds the Buddha, and he asks him what is enlightenment? What does it take to be enlightenment? And the Buddha just said, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And the idea behind that is like, what's enlightenment? The same things that you were doing before, the same things that you were doing after, they just have a different reason now. They're like, you have a higher meaning now. Like they're not where before you were chopping wood and carrying water for like survival or for like, you had to get it to your family or your,
right.
And whatever chop wood, carry water is to you, right? But then after you get this point of like what I'm saying, like the transcendent of like, now it's just, that's how we stay enlightened. That's how we stay in this mindset is like, you have to continue to help people and like, it doesn't end, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am religious and it's always funny. It's like, what is heaven? And I learned it from this parable. It was like, what's heaven? The same things that we're doing here, man. Like heaven is entered into 2 by 2, whatever that means. Yeah. I don't know, but you know what I mean? But like you can't, there's no single admission tickets,
dude,
to enlightenment or whatever, right? Well, you got to bring somebody with you.
I think what I love about that is, I had a mentor once, right? And, he told me, the funny thing with money, he's like, I don't think money's evil. I think money will just magnify like who you already are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, he was telling me like, man, I've heard it from so many people. Once I become rich, then I'll give more to charity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And those people, when they get rich, they never give the charity.
Right.
But there's some people who like, if they have $10, they'll give $1 to charity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when they have $100,000, like, great, they're going to give a whole bunch more to charity.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of that, right? Is like, that's part of what I love about the tacos thing is like, hey man, like I'm grateful for the people who are rich and they can donate large amounts to these events, right? And to the causes that we support. But I'm equally grateful for those people who like, some of them can't even afford to donate anything. The only thing you can do is just be there to support, right? Or volunteer to help us out. But like that matters. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that like all of us, regardless of the situation we're in, can do something.
Yeah.
And that's not just with my events. That's anywhere. There's a million great things to go support.
Yeah.
But all of us can go support something.
Yeah. And I think what's funny about, and not funny, maybe the wrong word there, but like what's interesting about that is to have like a successful organizations like Tacos Together or to have a successful career. I think you touched on a point that a lot of people kind of gloss over, and that's like your intentions.
Yeah.
Like how you approach, like, I read a book called, and it was a famous TED Talk. Have you ever heard The Presence by Amy Cuddy?
No.
It's a really famous TED Talk. I can't remember what the TED Talk. Oh, it's like power poses. Okay. Have you ever heard of that?
I'll check this one out.
But it's cool. Anyway, she did this TED Talk and then she wrote a book, and the book is actually fantastic. But there's one line that I'll never forget out of that book, and it's presence isn't about becoming. It's about, presence isn't about being. It's about approaching, which is like, your journey, right? Like that really famous quote, like the person who loves walking will get further than the person who loves the destination.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's just like, what are your intentions when you roll into this? Because again, like back to what we were talking about earlier, like people can feel that. Like we can all tell, like we have to put up with Apple, right? We get to go to tacos together.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
well, thank you for that, by the way.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, yeah, you kind of have a monopoly, but like, no, Tacos Together is unique, and we want to be there versus something like that. And I don't care. I have an iPhone, but whatever.
No, but thank you, man. Like, and seriously, that is the one that means a lot to me. But that is the goal, right? Is like, again, this is not like, hey, man, I've made $1 billion over this last year doing these things. It definitely is not that, right?
Yeah.
Again, myself and the team, like it's all volunteer work right now, but it's more than any of us, right?
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's not about, my COO or my CTO or the volunteers that help us build this thing. Like, this is bigger than any one of us, right?
Right.
And when we see the community as a whole get lifted, like, again, that's greater than any one of us individuals,
Absolutely.
And what that turns into is just powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just goes back to like bringing people together. Cause I remember like when I was trying to break out, and the reason this podcast started, but I was trying to break out and just trying to network, but like who wanted to network with a car guy? You know what I mean? Like I was selling cars at the time. And like, it's like attorneys, car salesmen, right? Like we're up there, right? Like people you don't like, dude. You know what I'm saying? No, I have a lot of good attorney friends, but it's like, where do you go, right? And it's cool to like be able to run into these, and because I was there, like I have a lot of empathy for the people who are in a 9-to-5 who don't feel like they can go to a networking event. Like you can though.
Yeah.
And whatever that turns into for you, even if you just make connections, because what I learned over this past year was I always thought it was just this stupid phrase that like rich people said, and then they left you and you paid $100,000 to hear them say this bullshit. But it wasn't. I learned it like your net worth is your
network is
your network is your net worth. I didn't know what that meant until this year when you actually start like networking. And again, like it's about giving, right? Like if you just give, you know what I mean? And you keep going and you just offer everything that you can, and you try not to keep nothing in return, right?
Yeah.
I think and what's cool about that is like, I learned more about sales that way too. Like sales is really like a transaction occurs when you feel like you got a better deal than me, like, even though you gave me money, right?
Yeah.
Like it's always funny when I teach this, because I also get a lot of pushback, but like sales is like a win-win thing. And I'm like, no, it's kind of like a lose-win, because they'll feel like they got a better deal than me, right? How many times have we bought something and been like, man, I stole that.
Yeah.
It was a steal, right? Like he didn't know it. I'm glad I had to pay for it and get out of there because I thought he was going to come after me, right? Like, and it's not a bad thing, and I'm not trying to like make this a negative thing or anything, but that's kind of how I view networking. It's like I'm giving more. Like people have to feel like, they got that from me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, right? As you give, right, and you genuinely want the people around you to succeed.
Yeah.
Eventually you'll build up this army of people that all they want is for you to succeed, right?
Yeah.
That all they want is your success.
Yeah.
I finally read that book again about a year ago when this all started, right? I read that book, The Go-Giver.
Oh, yes.
Super short book.
It's
Bob Berg and one other author, and I apologize. I don't know his name right off the top of my head.
No, you're good.
Bob and I have actually spoken a little bit before after I read the book. And it like that was a game changer for me, right?
Yeah.
This understanding and this idea of like, man, as you are the person that builds the community and loves others, right, and cares about them and wants them to succeed.
Yeah.
While you're not doing it with the express purpose of getting something back from them, the inevitable result is you end up surrounded with people who care about your success too. Right?
Yeah, who are genuinely interested in it.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you have this army of people who are like,
yeah,
what can I do to help you? Right. I want to support you.
Yeah.
And I even look back on tacos, right? And I look at the venues that we've been able to get into. I look at the sponsors. I look at, the people and all the things that have happened.
Yeah.
And it really is just this army of amazing people that have stepped forward to say, hey, I want to help you. Right.
Yeah.
And that has like, people ask me, what's the secret? And that's the secret right there, man. That was the rocket fuel, right? It wasn't a bunch of VC money. It wasn't, I don't know. It wasn't even knowing everyone in the world. It was just knowing the people who cared and caring for them first. Yeah.
And what's funny is like, it's just, life is just this, like networking, life, sales, whatever, is just this paradox of like control, which is like the less you realize you have, the more you gain.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this life of paradox, which is like the more you let go, the more that comes back. Like you have to, like one of my favorite books is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Have you ever read it?
I have.
The first chapter is Don't Try.
Yeah.
And I loved that chapter because he's like, it's this paradox of control. It's like, you've got to let go and you just got to give. And if something comes back sweet, and if it doesn't, even sweeter.
Yeah. Especially because you have that expectation that it doesn't come back. Right?
Yeah.
Because if you're holding that expectation the whole time, you're actually defeating yourself.
Right.
Yeah. It's a little weird, but like
you've got to let go. Yeah. And it's a weird thing, like to let go. And some people don't get it. And we get in debates about what that looks like. And we get in some debates with people who are like, well, you have to have expectations for people. And I was like, but you don't though, but you really don't.
Yeah.
And they're like, and then they bring up a lot of like weird stuff. Like I had a guy, I was talking to this and he was like, but like me and my wife, that's a transactional relationship. Like she expects me to do things. I expect her to do things. And I go, and I'm like, well, I don't know how long that's going to last. Or you're going to have to figure out that like, if one day this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was like, when I think about my wife, that is the least transactional relationship
you have to.
I can think of.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I mean, it's either that or like I am so in debt to her because she does so much for me, man.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right?
But like, it wouldn't work if she was sitting there holding it over my head all the time either.
Yeah, exactly.
It just
like, when is this going to work?
Right.
Yeah.
We try and we give when we can give, right?
Yeah.
But we can't like dollar for dollar hold this above each other's heads all the time.
Exactly.
It just collapses.
Right, and that's the idea. That's like the special piece about this whole thing is like you want to create a community, and I'm I teach people sales, and I am a salesperson, and the first thing that I tell people is like, we talk about the sales process, and they're like, what's step one? And I'm like, your intentions.
Yeah.
If you go into this deal thinking like with your mouth watering over the commission, or you go into this deal thinking this guy's going to be a douche, or you go into the deal thinking that this is going to be the hardest or the easiest, right? Like you're only going to be surprised, like how terribly wrong you were.
I'm guilty of that, right? Like
all of us are. Yeah,
earlier in my career when I did sales, I mean,
yeah,
that was it. Like I viewed people as dollar signs, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if you're a big dollar sign, you get more of my time, right? If you're a little dollar sign, you don't get any of my time, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about like buddying up with the guy you think is going to write you the big check, right? And
Right, dude.
sucking up and like not being who you are, and
only to find out that the guy you thought had a lot of money doesn't have any money,
right?
Or it's all
right?
tied up or whatever, right?
Right, sure, right? And then all those little deals that you like ignored, like that would have changed everything.
Yeah.
If you had just gotten to know them as people,
Right,
you know?
and I heard the phrase like, don't kick people going up the ladder because you'll meet them on the way down. Right?
Yeah.
It's just like, it just happens. And it's just this weird thing of like, and you can even go further and be like, well, that's, you're being nice so that no one will be mean to you in the future. And that's just as bad as like being nice to somebody hoping that they'll be nice back to you.
Right.
Is you just got to let it all go and be like, I'm just here. And because it's your intention. And I didn't realize that until I had this salesperson who we were talking. I was training him. And I had done what he had done. It was car sales. And I had sold cars for like 4 years before I'd gone into like management and corporate training. And I was looking at this guy and he's like, every customer I talk to is a douche. And I go, okay, well, let's look at it, right? And I was like, because I've done this for a long time and maybe 1 out of 10. Maybe somebody actually did have a bad day and they're coming in to beat me up. And that's fine. Like that happens, right? Like I'm not going to, but it's 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And you're telling me it's 10 out of 10 and I don't believe you. Right.
Totally.
So like I'm looking at this guy, how he talks to people, and I'm like, immediately I was like, dude, what did you, he talked to this customer and I was like, how did you approach it? What was in your mind before you went and talked to him? And I was like, be honest. He was like, well, this is just going to be another stupid deal, right? Or this guy's just going to be a douche. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, if you treat people like that, how are they supposed to react?
Yeah.
You're going to treat them like they're an asshole. They're going to be an asshole.
Yeah. Perspective, man, right? It changes. It changes everything, right?
Yeah. And what's funny is like, if you treat people like that and they don't do that, you're still in a bad spot because they're not gonna. You don't have that trust there, right?
Yeah.
And trust is a whole nother funny thing, but it's just interesting. Like it's how you approach every situation.
Yeah.
That's really going to determine what you get out of it. And that's so like, it's all these cliche things, but you don't get it until it happens to you, until you see it and you're like, holy shit, that's it, right? That's what he was talking about.
Well, again, perspective like changes everything, right?
Yeah.
After this last event, I'll be honest, I had this moment where I was a little bummed.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, okay, we had a little over 300 people show up for that last event.
That's not bad.
Well, it's not bad at all,
That's
right?
great. Yeah, okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, we had like 500 registered. So I was really hoping for like 400 to 500 people, right? And having a little over 300, I was kind of bummed.
Yeah.
I sat down. I remember feeling a little bad for myself for no reason. Like these people aren't paying to come in, right? Like it made no difference other than like my ego wanted 400 people there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Instead, I got 300 people, and I remember like going home that night and kind of being in a down mood, and my wife was like, "What's going on?" And we're talking about it, and she's like, "How many people came to your event a year ago?" And I was like, "Maybe 80."
Wow.
You know, she's like, "Okay, so you went from like 80 people like a year ago to like 300 people, and yeah, it could have been 400 people or 500 people, but like." A year ago, you were begging to break. Like I remember you talking to me and being like, "If I get more than 50 people, I'm gonna freak out, right?" And now you're telling me like, "Oh,
300's not enough."
Sorry, only 300 people showed up instead of 400. Now you're all mad about it, right?" Like, and I sat there and I was like, "Man, like perspective really is everything." Right?
Yeah, you
like,
gotta like change it. Yeah.
Yeah, a year ago I would have killed for this event, right?
Right.
But I let that expectation and perspective like skew what was really a truly great event.
Yeah.
You know, and that's my biggest regret of it is like, man, I sat there spending too much time putting too much negative energy out into the world, thinking, where are all these other people?
Yeah.
Instead of like cherishing the 300 plus that were there.
Yeah.
Right. And the thousands of donations that happened there. And like the amazing memories that happened there, man. There were some super cool
There were really fun stuff there.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
Amazing conversations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that ugly sweater fashion show was like more legit than I ever thought it would be. People got really into that.
Yeah, that was insane.
Right. And then I should have been there in the moment way more. And that's like something that I need to own and recognize and work better in the future. Yeah. But I love what you're saying, right? It's this idea of perspective. Yeah. And as we view things a little bit differently, everything changes.
Well, yeah. And you know, when I learned, so karma is, we were talking about this before the podcast, like, you know, karma, this idea of karma. And, you know, whether it's, you know, in Buddhism, it's karma, Hinduism, it's karma. In Christianity, it's called the law of the harvest, right? Essentially this idea that you reap what you sow kind of thing. But what was interesting when I was diving into karma is it's a little bit more than that in the sense that, and it goes back to this idea of what you're talking about, that like you don't own anything but right now. So like depression is in the past and anxiety lives in the future.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But neither of them exist anymore. Like the past, you like doesn't like you know what I mean? It's like it doesn't exist anymore.
Right. The past is in the past. Yeah, I get it.
It's like Mufasa, right? Like the Lion King. But it's so interesting because like you read, like when I read that and when I was learning, I was like, oh yeah, but then like, yeah, you learned it in the Lion King or something. And it's just this way of like rephrasing how you say things to like get it across to people because it really is like, but we've all been there, man. Like when I was at the Tacos Together event, I should have been totally focused there. But I was having so much anxiety about a work deal that we were trying to resolve. Yeah. That's why I missed the ugly sweater thing. Because I was just so focused. Like, but you know what's so crazy, man? This is what makes me the most mad and why I always have to remember this. Because there's a huge problem that comes on my plate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to solve this right now. It's going to be a catastrophe. And then like at Tacos Together, I was dealing with it. Called the guy. He was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. We'll just work on it. We'll just work it out on Monday. No worries. And I was like... I killed myself literally all weekend. Like I couldn't sleep only to have him be like, I get it, man. Mistakes happen. No worries. We'll just deal with it on Monday. No worries. Yeah. I'm like, okay, all right. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, you know, it's, and so when you're dealing with people, cause I feel like that's what this is about, right? Like when you're connecting with people, it's just like lose all of it. Right. And that's why I love that phrase that we were talking about, amor fati, which is, you know, the love of fate. And, but what's funny about the word amor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Enrique, but the word amor is like more of like a romantic kind of love, right? Is it?
Honestly, like that was more of like almost like I could say like te amo you and it's fine, but when you say like te quiero,
oh yeah,
that's like really passionate. Like,
oh
like,
yeah. Yeah, and so that's but that's kind of all of it, right? Is like there's that different level of like the love of where you're at right now.
Yeah.
You know, being there and just knowing that everything that led up to this point puts you right here for better or for worse. Yeah.
And again, man, I know we said it before the podcast started, but like, you know, like, I agree with that, right? Yeah. It's like, I look at my life and I think of like all the things that had to happen for me to end up being in Utah, throwing these like crazy taco themed networking, charity, community events, right? It's like never in a million years would I have predicted this is what I'd be focused on right now, right?
Right.
And for the three of us to be in this room together right now, it's like
A lot had to happen.
a lot had to happen.
to happen.
It's crazy.
So before I let you go, walk us through like how you came up with the idea of tacos together. Why did you even think it was a good idea?
Yeah.
All of these things. Like not that I'm accusing you.
No,
Why
of
is a
course,
weird
man.
word? But you know what I mean? Like it's an audacious thing to be like, I'm gonna throw this event, I'm gonna build it, and nobody's gonna pay for it.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It was 2020, right? I was working as a CRO at a company here in Utah. It was like a mental health wellness
Oh, cool.
kind of company, right? And we had just closed our best quarter ever, like company history. We were like, rocket ship to the moon kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID hit, and we were doing like on-site mental health and wellness benefits, right? And all of a sudden, no one was even going to the office anymore, right?
Yeah.
So like this company that I was the CRO of, and I was working every day with the CEO, and we were blowing this thing up. All of a sudden, like it was on life support, right? And to go from like our best quarter ever to like furloughing our entire sales team 2 weeks later, and like watching refund check after refund check going out of our account, right? We had closed these huge deals and watching these contracts get canceled. Honestly, I was putting everything I had into trying to save this company, right? And then, I remember waking up once and checking my weight, and I was 280 pounds, right? Like I'd ballooned up in weight. I was stressed. I was falling apart. And eventually got so burnt out there that I couldn't work there anymore, Instead of like taking time to recover correctly, I jumped straight into another startup. Put a ton
Thinking
of
it would like fix everything.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
dude, we've
right,
all been there. Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah, put a ton of time and energy, amazing guys I worked with, great product, started the fundraising around all of it. That fell apart too, And at the end of all of that, it was early 2021, January, February. I remember posting on LinkedIn, and I don't know why. I just remember telling the world, like, this is who I am, right? Like, this is what it is. This is like what it really feels like to be an entrepreneur and to be a failure. And, I remember taking a picture of my scale and showing people my weight. And I found out I was diabetic and all these things had fallen apart. And I remember thinking I would just get like destroyed, right? And instead, all I found was love, man. I found these amazing people who like rallied around me, and my follower count went up, which like that's whatever. But it's really this idea that like I was starting to have these real communications with real people, right? So after like going heavy into LinkedIn all through 2021, at the end of 2021, so again a year ago, I put up this post on LinkedIn that said, "Hey, would anyone want to go get tacos together?" And I thought, again, okay, like 10 people are going to say yes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden we had, like 30 people, 50 people like, yeah, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And then Jesse Randall over at Sweater reached out, and he was like, "Hey man, like sounds like you have some people who want to be there. We'd love to sponsor."
Yeah.
So he became my first sponsor, right?
So,
And all
yeah.
of a sudden,
And Jesse over there is fantastic.
such a good
Love
guy,
Sweater.
right?
And Sweater is changing the whole entire world
Yeah,
with their thing. Anyway,
they are, man.
They're freaking amazing.
Dude, love them. But anyway, so that's what it turned into. All of a sudden I had a sponsor. Someone else reached out and said, "Hey, we have a building. Hey, what about this?" Scott reached out and said, "Hey, we can help with the churros thing." So again, we probably had 75, 80 people show up, but we had an event,
That's sick.
right? And then that turned into another one. We
Yeah.
turned into another one, right?
Well,
And-
it's like, it's like that idea that's like, if you just like, if your intentions are right, people are going to be there
yeah.
to do it, And it's probably, and I mean, I wasn't on LinkedIn, very active LinkedIn back then, but I mean, that post was probably just refreshing. Everybody was in that boat.
Yeah.
Everybody, like I was in that boat. We were bouncing around from startup to startup because everybody had the next unicorn and everybody had the next $1 billion valuation.
Yeah,
And,
man.
you know what I mean? And it's like everybody was a rocket ship to the moon, only to jump on the spaceship and feel like, and we weren't going to the moon, we were going to the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, right. It was crazy, right?
Which is not a bad thing. Like I'm not knocking anybody
No.
or any company, because like I said, like everything in my life happened, put me
get us
right,
here,
put
right.
me right here. So I love it. But yeah, dude, it was probably just refreshing because back then, everybody was trying to like save face,
Yeah.
trying to put on a show. And it was probably just like, dude, thank you. This is how we actually, all of us feel. We all can't sleep at night because we're trying to save this ship or whatever. You know?
Oh man. And again, so that's just been amazing, right? What I thought was one event, the community came and reached out and said, hey, when's the next one? How do we help?
Heck yeah.
Companies reached out and said, hey, we want to sponsor. So that led from one event to another event to another event, you know. We ended up doing,
beautiful thing.
What, half a dozen, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them last year, which was fantastic,
dude.
right? And
yeah, you guys pumped out events.
yeah, I mean, we were going like crazy. You know, this upcoming year, we have a calendar, so it'll be every other month. You know, starting with February, we're putting our conference, and then every other month from there on out for the rest of the year. But you know, we're super stoked, man. Like we have a team now. Like it blows my mind, right? Like I have a team of 6 people, right?
That helps you.
Yeah, right. Cares, we have amazing companies that are sponsoring it. We have all these things that are starting to line up.
Heck yeah.
You know, we're hoping to take our first event out of state this upcoming year as well. So we're just trying to stay on top of it, man.
Heck yeah, that's what's up, man. Well, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you, how they can follow you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. So we're just now getting on all the other social medias. Right. It's pretty much at Tacos Together on everything. Occasionally it's at Tacos_Together, depending on the platform. Yeah. LinkedIn's really where I live. Paul Shin. I mean, connect with me, whatever. I'm a pretty easy, open guy. We're also rebuilding our website, but that's just tacostogether.com.
All right, dude. Well, I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on, man.